My name's Coby Skonord. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Ideawake. And I also have here Christian Cotichini here with me. And we're going to do our intros here in just a moment. But this is a follow-up to part one of the webinar series. And so looking forward to diving into how to innovate more effectively by leveraging both open innovation as well as internal innovation when it comes to crowdsourcing ideas.
Sounds great. And how you been doing, Coby?
Just living the dream, man. One day at a time.
Here you go.
Yeah, we got a foot of snow on the ground right now, which is interesting. About a 2-minute commute walk though, so don't really notice it too much. But how about yourself?
Well, my commute is a lot shorter than yours, I guess, because it's like maybe 30 feet. Which
Yeah.
I used to brag about, but now it's like everybody's doing it now. Not COVID hit, but we've been virtual for a long time. But
Yeah.
no, it's been unusually warm. I'm in Vancouver. Unusually warm, but really wet. So a really strong system that kind of starts just north of Hawaii and just kind of slams the Pacific Northwest with constant rain, like constant rain.
Well, I don't know, constant rain or constant snow. It's like, I guess those are two sides of the same coin as well, which is what we're going to talk about today. But with that, just like a little background on us. So Ideawake helps companies internally crowdsource ideas from employees. We're powering programs in 39 countries to over 185 cities and 12 different verticals total. Christian, I'll let you give your intro.
Absolutely. So, hello everybody. For those that didn't attend part one, I'm Christian Cotichini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HeroX. HeroX is the world's problem-solving platform that gives you access to the collective intelligence of humanity, what we call the global crowd, to solve almost any problem.
Awesome. And with that, where we're going to start is for those that might be joining this webinar but didn't join part one, just a really quick background that was more of a high level of why it's important to leverage crowdsourcing in the first place. We're going to start there for the first couple slides and then dive straight into some more specifics. So in the last 15 years, over 52% of Fortune 500 companies that were listed are no longer listed. Christian, I know you like throwing in an extra point about that, where they didn't disappear necessarily, but have significantly decreased in size, or some of them have disappeared.
Absolutely, and it's what's really happening is just things are moving fast, and everybody knows that. But companies need to respond to that; they need to react to it, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. And really, what it means is no industry is safe from new models of delivery. So most of these, right, from a standpoint of looking at taxi cabs to Uber, media and content blockbuster, looking at Netflix, had not one, not two, but three chances to buy Netflix and didn't. And then now really looking forward to healthcare. What we believe, at least at Ideawake, we do a lot of work in the healthcare space, looking at Amazon Care or these new delivery models specifically for primary care. We think healthcare is the next industry that really has opportunity to be disrupted. And with that, what does that mean for your business? And hopefully what you leave here with today is that companies really need to continually invent with themselves, and both frontline employees and experts from that global crowd offer a diverse perspective. With that, what we're going to do is kind of look at just, what both HeroX and Ideawake do are very similar, but there are distinct differences. Really what we both believe, though, is that they're two sides of the same coin. So I'll say my piece over here, from bringing the inside up and out from what Ideawake does. It's really connecting with frontline employees and more effectively breaking down silos to enable collaboration at scale in your organization. And the ultimate output of running these internal type of programs is fostering an innovation culture and actually building up the internal capability that you have to test and implement both ideas internally, but as well as from great partners like HeroX externally.
Makes a lot of sense. From a contrast standpoint, so we're big believers at HeroX of the power of a good team, a culture of innovation is really important, and all of that. But at the end of the day, no matter who you are, no matter how smart your people are, more smart people work for somebody else, to badly quote a quote. And what open innovation lets you do is complement the ideas, the know-how, the talent of your team with the smarts of people that don't work for you. And most importantly, help identify the right people to solve a problem or to contribute to innovation and ideas. And that kind of idea that rather than trying to find a needle in a haystack, you can kind of turn a magnet on and the needle will come to you, is one of the key pieces to crowdsourcing, and almost its superpower. And we'll talk more about that as we get going forward. But crowdsourcing, like open innovation, really allows you to tap into the, the know-how that's out there, either in a very targeted way or a very broad and open way. It also lets you target different communities and constituents. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Great. And with that, what we're going to do, is kind of go into each side of the coin. So we'll start going into specifically bringing the inside out, or what Ideawake focuses on, and then we'll flip it around and then focus on your side, Christian, which is bringing the outside in and how it works and the value of it. So it's not a secret to anybody in the room, but employees closest to a product or process often are going to have the best insights on how to improve it. A great story, and one of our early stories was Exam One. So they ran a continuous improvement program, but by taking it digital, they were able to save an additional $1.4 million in 6 months. These were from ideas that were as simple as making a form field required when a agent was submitting a new request in order to reduce error rates. So lots of small wins inside of companies can have a very measurable impact, and also really just help engage employees or your internal crowd. And according to Gallup back in 2017, so 30% of workers strongly agree that their opinions seem to count. But if we could double that percentage, Gallup projected that there would be a 27% reduction in turnover, 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. So looking at that productivity piece as well as turnover, it's a significant ROI to the organization to enable these types of programs. And seeing this in practice, one of our other great partners, Squaw Valley Alpine Meadows, they are a ski resort, meaning this can be used in any industry, whether it's hospitality, healthcare, retail, but they were able to increase employee engagement, according to McKinsey's Organizational Health Index, by 74% in just 6 months. And just going into like how the internal crowd, the process works internally with your crowd, what Ideawake does is facilitates a process of capturing ideas from frontline employees under things we call challenges, which is something very similar to what HeroX does and has as its mechanism for capturing solutions. And from there, employees will submit ideas. The crowd's going to help surface the best ideas using different types of voting. And then you have a process for selection and ultimately assignment of ownership and implementation of those ideas. Looking at this in a different way, just a little bit more tactically, it's posting a challenge topic, once again, going all the way through to testing and implementing of those shortlisted ideas that can have the most value add to your organization. Here's just some examples of things that we've seen customers use, right? Everything from reducing scrap in a manufacturing line, improving safety, productivity improvements in sales, all the way to getting customers to choose you over the competition. So there really is no limitation into how we've seen customers use Ideawake internally. But going into Christian's point now, let's dive into what the crowd looks like bringing the outside in.
Yeah, that's great. And can you give some examples of like scenarios you've been brought into that where this internal innovation approach has been really successful?
Oh, of course, and I didn't want it to be all about me, Christian, but
that's okay. We love you, so.
So I would say, those two examples I gave, and really where there's a couple common use cases. Normally, companies are going to want to become more efficient, or they're going to want to drive new growth. So think new products and services. But everything is always centered around wanting to engage employees or increase employee engagement. So basically, if increasing employee engagement is the baseline, then you have the two other mechanisms, which are like, hey, we want to reduce costs or improve efficiency. or drive new growth inside of the organization. So like I said, we've seen it in like over 12 different verticals or industries at this point, all across the world. And it's really interesting, I think, that during COVID, especially, we've seen a huge uptick in terms of how like all the different ways that the platform's getting used. So these are the questions, right? Like the drivers of questions that get asked from the previous slide, but it's everything from reopening safely to how do we, improve our supply chain in order, asking an entire company, how do we improve our global supply chain in order to help get PPE to hospitals faster? So there's no limitation on the questions that you can ask and really what the crowd is capable of internally for the specific, specifically in the light of improving process or, some ideation. But Christian, I'd love to go into you now and talk about HeroX.
Sure, that sounds great. Let me share my screen.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
You know the deal. Interview.
All good. I'll stop share.
Sounds good. And flip over. All right. Should be there.
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So we've worked with a lot of organizations doing open innovation projects and crowdsourcing, and a lot of them do internal innovation projects. A lot of them, what we've noticed is that there are companies that have a culture of innovation, and so they're looking at multiple approaches and how to really boost innovation. Innovation's a funny thing in that it's it's like it's only clear in hindsight. In foresight, innovation looks like bad ideas, risky ideas, not following the way we do things around here, and a lot of other things that I won't get into. But innovation is only seen in hindsight. It's kind of like when you watch a painter paint a painting. It's not art until he's done. In the meantime, halfway through, it's going to look like just a bunch of weird colors. Yeah, you've seen Bob Ross, right? That's his name, right?
I think so. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
You know the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the digital Prozac, but he'll do these paintings and it's not really coming together. And then just at the end, he adds a little bit, and then boom, it's like, oh, it's mountains and they look great, or the sky looks like a sky now. 2 minutes ago, it didn't. Innovation's kind of like that. So what's really important is that, to practice and gain a culture of innovation and have people, be able to practice taking these crazy ideas, having them have a positive impact, look back and do pattern recognition on that. And the internal innovation is a really important part of that. The companies that don't have a culture of innovation and do crowdsourcing, what we often find is that they do crowdsourcing, they get all these ideas from the crowd, and then they don't do anything with them. It kind of dies on the vine. So I think there's a real synergy between the platform that you guys offer and your emphasis on internal innovation best practices, and then the crowdsourcing model that we help organizations bring. And I would really recommend that organizations look at an innovation management program that involves both components. I think that's really important. Now the crowdsourcing approach is really based upon the idea of accessing talent and insights and experiences that you don't otherwise have access to. That's really the fundamental difference, right? Even accessing customer ideas and insights is a great application for crowdsourcing. We have larger companies that they get a lot of alumni participation, so former employees contributing through crowdsourcing engagements. And then obviously, different experts in different fields and different ideas. And the crowdsourcing works really well to bring the, crazy ideas that might just work, looking at solving a problem in a completely different way, using a completely different approach, which is a great application for things like data science and AI and other new technologies. Um, and also finding out how has this problem been solved in the past, right? How have others tried to sort this problem out? So that's kind of the key differentiator for me about whether you're doing internal innovation or open innovation is the talent pool that you're accessing. I think, as you mentioned, Coby, employees have, they accumulate a tremendous amount of insights and knowledge about a company. And if the company doesn't have a culture that supports innovation, supports ideas being shared, criticism flowing freely through the organization, you end up with the water cooler effect, right? Where
Mhm.
employees express their views of what should and shouldn't be done, and how the company should solve certain problems negatively as gossip to other employees because they feel helpless. So the internal innovation approach of using a challenge to invite people to solve problems within your company is a great way to almost weaponize that know-how and that insight, and it does a lot to really mitigate that kind of gossipy and negative input, which can have a big impact on morale.
Yeah, and it's like if that input's going to be happening either way, you might as well channel it to improve, right, overall engagement, and ultimately, right, profitability of the organization, and operational efficiency. Is it really drop the conversations are going to be happening either way. You might as well channel them in a positive way. But it's also going to allow you, right, to your point, Christian, to be able to tap into once you build this internal capability and actually can take ideas and make them happen. It really opens up your ability, right? Whether it's coming externally from platforms like HeroX, you can tap into this global pool. But if you can't take action on the ideas internally that you're receiving, right, it's going to be the same thing as capturing the ideas internally at the water cooler and not being able to action them.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. So we kind of use this diagram to organize the realm of, like, how you can staff up your company, how you can get stuff done. For years, there's been a lot of talk about that fourth column, about AI, machine learning, and robots, how they're going to do everything. And self-driving cars and truck drivers are all going to be out of business and all that. There's one thing I've learned about that, and don't get me wrong, I mean, HeroX was co-founded by Peter Diamandis. He's Mr. Exponential Technology. I'm not negative on it, but the hype almost always precedes the reality. And when it's complex technology, when it's technology that involves a lot of social change and infrastructure change and behavior change, it can take a lot longer than people think for these solutions to become really, like ready, like industrial scale ready. Obviously, AI and robots and other forms of automation have already had a huge impact, um, but they're not necessarily going to be um, you know moving as fast as people predict in all areas and spaces. Um, I mean, you remember Oculus Rift? Wasn't that, weren't we supposed to be doing this with using goggles, Coby? I think
No,
so.
or Google Glass. I mean, I used my first. It wasn't Oculus. It was actually it was. I used my first Oculus like what? My girlfriend's brother had one. Used it like a month and a half ago. But I mean, I think the first time I heard about it was what, 5 years ago, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
first,
And the first VR goggles were actually, I think there were VR goggles made by Nintendo, or maybe even Atari. I forget. It was actually a game system using VR, and it crashed and burned. And this is like I don't know, like 25 years ago. But I remember this talk I saw on VR, and I promise there's a point here. That that was by a leading. I won't name him, but a leading evangelist. almost a celebrity figure in the VR community. And he showed a slide from his first like VR pitch deck, which was, I think done in like the late 80s or early 90s, when VR became, virtual reality became really hot. And he was like, it was like a cover of um, like, I don't know, a science magazine, I forget which one, about it's ready for prime time. And so, and then his point when Oculus Rift was coming out was, well, now it's really, now we're here. We've been waiting a long time and now we're here. And now it seems like, it's going to take a little while longer for that technology to perfuse the same way. Google Glass the same way. And hey, listen, in many ways, the Apple is just the reboot of the Apple Newton. Sorry, the iPhone. The iPhone is the reboot of the Apple Newton, which probably the younger people in the audience are like, "What's an Apple Newton?" Well, you can Google it. It was cool at the time, but it crashed and burned. So my point is that hey, use technology where you can for for boosting the automation of your company. It's really important. In certain industries, it's table stakes. In other industries, the application of machine learning is obviously a big one, and other forms of advanced technology can make a huge competitive differentiator. I think that most companies are leaning into freelancers and the power there. What HeroX specializes is in that third column, crowd, and being able to access large groups of self-selecting, self-organizing talent that can act at flash scale, meaning it can come quickly, focus on a problem with a deadline, and really move things in parallel. And they don't replace freelancers. They don't replace your core team. Crowdsourcing is not outsourcing. That's one of the biggest misconceptions I think there is. If you effectively crowdsource, you're going to end up with creating more work for your team to do. And they're not going to complain because it's going to be good work. It's going to be winning work, successful work, because people love making progress both individually and at the company level. What they don't like is being stuck solving the same customer service problems, dealing with the same inefficiencies, like it's Groundhog Day. So, crowdsourcing will accelerate your company moving forward, and that is going to be successful and be a win-win for everybody involved. That's our view of crowdsourcing. That's why we focus on crowdsourcing the way we do. But again, the core team, there's a tremendous amount of know-how and insights, and also a committed and engaged group of people. And so the internal challenges and internal innovation approaches helps you leverage that capability, really the first two columns. And then the second one really helps you, the crowdsourcing helps you leverage the second two columns the best. And that's really how we look at it. Does that make sense so far?
I think it makes perfect sense. And something that we found where, just kind of going off of some of your points, Christian, it's people often will look at things in boxes, meaning that each one of these initiatives are like strategies or mutually exclusive, meaning that if we're going to go the software AI robotics route, then we can't go down the crowd route. And really, I think what the theme of our overall talk today is that none of these are mutually exclusive, right? You can actually tap freelancers and have a core team. You can tap the crowd and also leverage software AI robotics. But at least from what we see, right, with a lot of the folks that we talk to, is everybody gets in this one track mindset where this is the strategy versus having a basket of strategies that you can tap into.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we don't have time to get into it today, but as we've been working with so many companies using to apply crowdsourcing for innovation, we've learned a lot about innovation, and we've in fact developed like a 9-category framework for how you categorize and differentiate the different forms of innovation. And so there's 9 kind of modes of innovation in our model that we use. And it turns out that the internal team is really good at a certain set of them, and they're not so good at the other side of them,
Mhm.
right? And in fact, a great example of that is this guy. Where am I going? Right, so this guy. Actually, let me show you this slide instead. This guy, everybody knows who this guy is, right? Isn't he the one that's um, um, injecting microchips into all our bloodstreams? Isn't that
So
what's going
where
on?
did we go with this
Um,
one?
oh, that's the wrong webinar. Sorry, that's the wrong webinar. I'll talk about that later. No, but seriously, Bill Gates, for those that don't know, committed 90% of his wealth to philanthropy. He created the Gates Foundation. He's been working on that a long time. And the Gates Foundation has done some pretty amazing things. They're on the brink of eliminating polio from the planet. Now, when I read about that, I'm like, I thought polio was already eliminated from the planet, but it turns out, nope, only in rich countries. In poor countries, there's a lot of suffering going on. I won't go into the details, but it's been only a crazy entrepreneur could have pulled it off and have the persistence to do it. So they're doing lots of cool work. One of the big problems they're trying to solve is helping improve the sanitation conditions in the developing world. That requires that last mile solution known as a toilet. And yeah, that's poo, by the way, that Gates is looking at. He has a weird relationship with poo, as far as I can tell. But because he carries a jar in his pocket with it.
All times.
Almost. But which, anyway, let's not go there.
Yeah.
But my point is that he's got access to some of the smartest people on the planet. He can pretty much pick up the phone and talk to anybody. And what he did was to invent this toilet, he crowdsourced. And they launched a crowdsourcing project and open call to ask any organization to design a toilet. This is one of the solutions that got built. And by the way, he provided financing for the best ideas so they continue to commercialize their solution, which is a really cool approach to crowdsourcing. It doesn't always have to be like a prize, like, oh, here's a check, now go away. It can often be opportunity, royalties, like equity in a joint venture, financing to continue. There's lots of different methods of being able to incentivize these open innovation projects. Bill Gates realized that the power of the crowd was going to trump any expert group he could hire. Then they could move faster and they could fully and vigorously explore the solution domain for this problem and come up with some crazy ideas. And by the way, a lot of them were way ahead of their time, but the technology to make some of these ideas work are quickly, rapidly approaching. There's some really interesting work going on here, which is pretty amazing. And another example is just recently, I think this was like this week actually, like really recently, but Elon Musk just announced, he tweeted $100 million, he's donating $100 million to the X Prize Foundation, which is our sister organization. They do large nonprofit crowdsourcing projects like 5 million and above. HeroX, we do both nonprofit and for-profit crowdsourcing projects, often at a smaller scale. We work together on a lot of projects. So Elon has announced a $100 million prize. I think that's X Prize's largest prize for a carbon capture tech that will change the world. And I know that he's been talking about this with X Prize for a long time, so it's really great to see it launched. The point here is that this is going to cause a wave of innovation and ideas. And Elon's the CEO of 2 companies, so he's busy. So that's the beauty of crowdsourcing, is it's self-managing, self-selecting. If you design the challenges correct, they're self-managing, and it's literally, you can recruit an army of creative thinkers, solvers, of innovators to work on a problem, while your company can stay focused on the mission at hand. And that kind of parallel innovation approach is super, super powerful. And I believe that companies are going to leverage it more as crowdsourcing becomes more sophisticated and more commonplace. Does that make sense so far?
Sounds great to me. You're preaching to the choir over here.
Yeah, and again, I'll emphasize that the way to look at and compare and contrast open innovation versus internal innovation projects is really about are you looking for that outside the box thinking? Are you looking for ideas? Has the problem already been vetted internally? And you're thinking that there might be even a better approach? That's the time to go outside of the organization. Another reason to go outside the organization is because you don't want to invest the talent that's required and the work that's required to adopt new technologies, right? Data, machine learning, data science, AI, and drone technology, and a lot of these other cutting edge technologies are a great application for crowdsourcing. Even if the innovation you're looking for could easily be done in-house. If you're thinking, okay, now we got to go find and hire a bunch of data scientists, and we've got to understand it and manage it and plan it. We're going to make all these rookie mistakes. That's a lot of work, right, for the company. But if you can go out and say, okay, here's the efficiency of this business process, or here's this problem over here. Now we want a solution that's 50% better than this number here. And so you kind of create testable criteria as a challenge goal, incentivize it, and put it out there, and the solutions will come streaming in. And it's super cool and powerful. And you don't need to know anything about, you don't even need to know if the problem you have is a data science problem, or is it an algorithm problem, or is it a database optimization problem, or is it a new materials problem? That's the beauty of crowdsourcing. It's an open call. And in fact, one of the biggest mistakes we see organizations doing when they're doing crowdsourcing is they presuppose the solution, and then they try to crowdsource by spec instead of crowdsource by problem statement. It's always important to back up to the problem statement and say, okay, this is the problem that we want to solve, or the opportunity, because you can also frame it as an opportunity. Here's the status quo. Here's how we measure it. Here's what we're asking for as an improvement. Here's how we're going to measure it. And if you solve this problem, here's your reward. It's that simple. And you don't even have to worry about how that problem is going to be solved. One of the most promising solutions we recently did the Lunar Loo challenge, which is a space toilet. You notice how I have a theme here, right? I'll talk about number 2 a lot. I don't know why. My mother probably did something to me. I don't know. But the challenge with the Lunar Loo is there's 2 very distinct use cases: pooping in space and in 1/6 gravity, which is a problem with the same device, right? And turns out that one of the best solutions used an inflatable structure. So it's a blow-up toilet, basically, right? Or at least parts of it were inflatable. This is something that just wasn't on NASA's radar.
Yeah.
Right. To use that kind of structure, and it turns out it works really well, and you can do some pretty cool things with fluid dynamics and semi-solid fluid dynamics. Don't ask what that is, but I think you get the idea. Yeah, just amazing ideas that you would have never thought of. And NASA is a client of ours. They do a lot of crowdsourcing projects on HeroX, and the reason they do it is because they've learned the power of creative and new ideas. And even if they assigned all their experts to these problems, they're still going to be stuck with inside the box thinking to a certain extent, because that's just the nature of human social dynamics. Is when we're in groups, we tend to gravitate towards a shared understanding of things, and we create blind spots that the crowd doesn't have.
Definitely. Right. And going off that, right, I'd say you had said one of the things that, what biggest mistakes that you see is people defining the solution instead of the problem.
Yeah,
I would say one of the biggest pieces, like from running these internally with employees, is really not one of the biggest criteria for success is really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and having clear success metrics for it. I think that
absolutely.
applies right on both use cases. Um, that's something. It sounds like it sounds very doesn't sound groundbreaking or like rocket science, but it's astonishing how often we see people that will launch these challenges without having a clearly scoped problem internally.
It's funny you say it's not rocket science. It's so I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, over 20 years, over 25 years, and um, done. I've launched 4 tech companies and been involved in a lot of other ones. I've had a lot of innovation successes in my career, and it always surprised. So without even planning it in advance, I have 25 years of almost full-time and constant experience in the innovation cycle in many domains and many scales and many iterations. And it always surprises me how people, this is a trap that organizations fall into, and the thinking of the people in those organizations is that they just kind of assume they understand innovation. It's almost unexamined, and they don't realize, at least from my experience, that the way innovation looks in foresight, like in the present and future, compared to hindsight, is completely different. Completely different.
Completely different.
And you can't, if you get these ideas, you can't have this like, oh, I'm looking for the innovation in these ideas. That's not how it works, right? And it kind of gets back to what I said earlier, which is, creating a culture of innovation, and having practice, having your team practice with the innovation lifecycle and see the ideas. Some of the best innovations I've seen, both at as simple as tuning and tweaking a business process, or how we do customer care, all the way through to breakthrough features in a product or whatnot. They almost always start as a dismal failure, right? A failed experiment, an embarrassment, somebody screwed up, or it looks like a screw up, and then it iterates from there, and they find the solution. A lot of times, it's not about like picking the right mountain to climb, like the innovation mountain to climb. It's actually climbing a nearby hill, so that you have a new perspective of the terrain around you, so you can find the right mountain to climb, even though that hill's it was the wrong climb to do. If you hadn't have climbed that hill, you would have never found the right mountain. And there's a ton of examples of that.
Yeah, and just to go off that same analogy, right? If you don't climb the hill in the first place, you're not going to have the capacity, the capability to get up the mountain. You got to climb often several hills, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Several hills in the way before you can climb a mountain. Going back to practice, right, and iteration,
Yeah.
it's as much about the journey as it is the destination.
Yeah, which kind of gets to this slide here in terms of just the different applications and the different ways of framing and modeling it. But you can't separate the failure rate and the bad ideas from the good ideas in innovation. There's a statistical curve around innovation, meaning you either have to have hundreds. I mean, VCs understand this really well, right? If you want to find the $1 billion market opportunity, there has to be 100 startups with different ideas, and then the $1 billion one will be, one of the startups will figure it out, and the others will crash and burn. You can't preemptively optimize for just the one. You need that failure rate. You need that the ratio of good ideas to bad ideas in order to have innovation happen. Innovation is by definition driven by creating a breakthrough, and creating a breakthrough means lots of failed attempts. Just ask any entrepreneur or inventor. Read any quote about innovation. Most businesses, they manage projects, they risk manage. Obviously, a good company will have a very strong fixation on customer service, the product performance. So they're de-risking, 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 de-risking. And that can create a culture where there's literally an immune system against risk. And that turns into an immune system against bad ideas. And that turns into ideas not being shared out of fear that they'll be seen as a bad idea. And that creates a culture that will struggle with innovation. Even when they see the innovation, even when they're offered the innovation, they'll struggle with it. And so that's kind of what I was getting to, and what I think is really a synergy between both our approaches, which is your solution, internal innovation, gives the team an opportunity to practice bad ideas in almost like a gamified way. And you can, doing it right, you're the kind of authority figures and leaders in the organization can signal, hey, it's okay to fail. It's in our culture, right? It's not a moral negative. Failing in a customer installation is definitely a negative because it's a business goal to delight customers. But the problem with risk avoidance in companies is if it's not signaled that it's okay to fail in the right context, failure and risk and bad ideas become a moral negative, meaning that they're never good. And that's the danger. So your product, not only does it allow great ideas to spread around the company, it also allows that muscle to grow. And obviously when you do crowdsourcing, you're interacting with people outside your culture. And what we've learned outside of those cultural norms, the appetite for like risk taking, like positive risk taking, meaning like coming up with how am I going to solve this problem, and submitting to crowdsourcing projects, knowing that there's 100 or 200 or 300 other submitters. So your chance of winning is 1 in 300. That level, that kind of risk, the appetite for risk outside of a culture that's dampening it down is super high. It's really, really encouraging to see that level of risk. And we don't call it risk in that context. We call it entrepreneurship and innovation. But as I said before, the difference between an entrepreneur and a business person is the level of risk they take on, right? Yeah. So that, I think that's a really important point to make as well. I don't know if there's anything else I need to say about this slide here, but the definitely we help organizations take any business problem, any a goal, first off vet it to make sure it's a good application for a crowdsourcing project, and then help model it and game. I don't like the word, but it's the most accurate, simple way of describing it. Gamify the problem statement into a crowdsourcing project. Incentivize it, structure it, create rules. Avoid cheating or submissions. Matching the challenge guidelines, but not matching the business impact, right? The desired impact, things like that. So, creating that structure, we help organizations in lots of different areas, different sizes and scales as well. And one of the things that we're looking forward to doing with you guys is collaborating with organizations that are going to be doing both internal innovation, innovation management, idea management, and crowdsourcing, because I really do believe that that model is going to work really well.
I agree. And with both of them together, right, you're just going to get an overall better output, like than having one of them by themselves. And it's like it's there's varying scales and stages of development that you want to be in before taking one of the two on in the first place, but there are easy ways that you can get started.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think I'll just say one last thing about HeroX, and I think this is somewhat similar to the way you guys approach your platform, obviously targeted towards the employees. But we're not a rent-a-crowd platform. We're more of like a social network for innovation, meaning organizations on HeroX can build followers, just like you could use YouTube and upload content and build followers and engage with customers and other parties that are interested in the domain and the content you're uploading. On HeroX, you post challenges and ask for innovation ideas, and you'll attract followers. And that obviously creates the ability to do a whole program of open innovation where you're not starting from scratch every time. And instead you're able to really help, manage your kind of army of solvers, similar to how you manage, other groups on other social platforms. And that approach of HeroX isn't a two-sided market of solvers and seekers, but instead is a social platform that lets organizations build their own crowds, linked between on HeroX to all the other crowds, so crowd of crowds, and make it super easy for the right solvers to find the projects they should be working on, to join 10 or more projects they want to track and follow. That whole dynamic, it really changes the economics of crowdsourcing, makes it far more cost effective and far easier to scale crowdsourcing for organizations, and is really the missing ingredient for crowdsourcing to be an ongoing business strategy, a persistent strategy that the organization learns to get good at and taps into when and as needed on a regular basis. And I think that as we work together, the synergy between your platform, which has a lot of similar benefits longer term, and I love platforms where the value of the platform increases as you use the platform, like that positive increasing returns. And HeroX and crowdsourcing has that same dynamic as you guys have, and so we're really looking forward to exploring how we can synergize and integrate our products to work really well together and allow that collaboration to occur both inside and outside the organization.
I love it.
That's great. So I think that's probably about all we should cover. Do we want to move on to questions, or what would you like to do, Coby?
Yeah, that sounds great to me, Christian. And I think, we're right at about 10-minute mark, or 12 minutes. So would love to take on any questions that folks have. It looks like we have one or two here. And, Christian, as well, just tapping into that last slide of, how can you start taking action? Just really quickly for like 2 minutes on that. It's often at the abstract level, right? It's actually relates to Joanne's first question here of, when working in an organization which does not nurture a culture of innovation, what are strategies you have found to be successful to encourage idea generation? And kind of going off of that, what we found, at least from the internal use case, is although like what we talked about is the great, awesome state where you have leadership that's going to support failure in quotes, versus calling it a learning instead of a failure. That's a CEO that supports innovation, right? Is somebody that calls a failure a learning, because it really is. What we found is that we have a framework that we've designed called Walk, Run, Scale. And it's starting off with things that are a lot lower risk and showing some type of return on investment to leadership. So you don't start with the X Prize, right? Necessarily, like you don't I think what was it, Moonshot, that Moonshot project, or like $100 million prize for something. You start off with $1,000 prize and show success for something, and go back to the CEO showing that this could be a strategy that works. So that would be going to employees, right, and showing some cost savings, financial savings, or increase in engagement from a quick win that does not have a lot of complexity to implement or time to implement. And then you start to build up momentum. Most times where people start is they're going to be thinking about, getting to the $100 million prize. And that's where everybody starts. And oftentimes for CEOs that are new at larger organizations to innovation or these types of initiatives, that's what they're aiming for. And really what it's all about is starting small and building up your muscle so you can actually climb the mountain.
Absolutely. Agreed 100%. It's, starting with a large crowdsourcing project is kind of like, deciding you want to get into, running and starting with marathon. It's not going to end well most of the time. I mean, there are exceptions, and There are organizations like X Prize who do this for a living. So in a donation model, the nonprofit model, you can totally engage with them. But then you've got an expert team, running the process. For organizations to benefit directly from innovation approaches like what we're talking about, I think there's a really strong argument that there needs to be some practice and some experience gained there, and also a culture shift. What's so I would this question gets into a area I probably have a pretty strong opinion about. And as an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs have kind of a rebellious attitude towards the status quo. But I would say that the trap that organizations fall into around innovation is where their words and their actions diverge, right? Because there's very few business managers I've heard say that innovation is not a priority, or innovation is not important, or we don't, or acknowledging that their company suppresses innovation, right? Or suppresses risk. They almost all say the same stuff. And then they go back to their regular lives and they don't, and I'm not saying they're being dishonest, they can't see what they can't see, right? So it needs to start with a certain amount of education, in my opinion. And the good news is there's a lot of consulting organizations out there, a lot of training companies, innovation experts. Turns out that one of the hottest areas to bring in consultants is in innovation, which isn't surprising if you think about it. And so I think it needs to start with, with an understanding of the importance of innovation and the understanding of investing in an innovation development program. That can start with bringing a consultant or getting some training. We often do lunch and learns for companies around innovation, just purely from an educational standpoint, just to raise the awareness and understanding with decision makers of the importance of innovation, because we know that once they have a better and stronger grasp of why it should be a priority and the competitive forces in their market, and they understand now that they can take action, they know they'll be more interested in our product. So that education approach works really well with us. And so that I would focus on that. The culture of innovation can be measured, and the best practices around an organization can be measured, and employee engagement is also really a strong measure as well. So there's a lot there that people can go. Here's an acronym that I love, that I heard. I forget where I heard it now. It was in I think it was in The Originals, which is a really great book about misfits. It's the acronym's HIPPO. That most organizations, their kind of innovation approach, how they validate ideas and get funding and all that, is the HIPPO method. The HIPPO method is the highest paid person's opinion. Highest paid person's opinion. HIPPO. And I remember when I read that, I laughed out loud, because it's like, yeah, that's totally true. It's so many organizations, and we fall into the trap at HeroX, even though I dislike it. But the problem is that the biggest blind spots are going to be, unfortunately, I hate to let people know this, but the higher you up in the leadership structure of your organization, the bigger your blind spots are, and the more amplified they are. That's why there's a term called "the emperor has no clothes." There isn't, a term called, the pauper, right, or has no clothes, right? And so there needs to be an understanding that the HIPPO is a dynamic of all organizations, and it's toxic and really bad. Great leaders should be asking questions, not giving answers. And so that's just a great dipstick, if you will, to just look at how projects are approved, and that interface between decision making and innovation. And is HIPPO going on, or are we really letting People run with ideas and creating a meritocracy. That's really important.
Definitely. Let's see. I think we got another question here to HeroX. How do you build a crowd around your challenge? Getting a little more tactical.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. The quick answer is it's like how do you get people to read your blog post, right? I mean, the crowdsourcing is really broken into two steps for engagement, right? The first thing is nobody can participate in a crowdsourcing project they don't know exists. So the first thing is people have got to see it. The second thing is then they've got to decide to participate. So the first problem is just creating that awareness. So it's really no different than how do you get people to read your blog, or how do you get people to watch your YouTube video. You need to be out there sharing it, promoting it, and there's smart ways of doing that, and not so smart ways of doing that, because you're probably, you can probably target your project to likely sources of interested people. Using the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So if you're trying to solve a problem with, sustainable packaging, or, creating a better mousetrap, there's probably people that really have a strong opinion about that problem being solved. They want to live in a world where there's a better mousetrap. And so if you can, share your vision of the future you're looking for, you're going to get people interested in, they're going to be attracted. Their friends are going to tell them, hey, you should check this out, because I know you were talking about this. And so you're going to energize people's networks to bring the idea to them. They're going to come. And then you need to incentivize participation. And it's not just about the money. It's also about, creating transparency, creating an interesting problem, helping people further their careers by their participation in your project, or get recognition. There's a lot of methods of incentivizing. We use a 7-factor incentivization model when we're looking at it, and monetary is only one of them. So you need to make sure that you properly incentivize these projects for people to participate and follow through. And then there's just a lot of good engagement best practices of managing a healthy crowd, supporting your solvers, giving them resources and a voice and communication, which will really help them stay engaged and excited and passionate about it, the project, all the way through to submission.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I've heard great things about HeroX being able to do the connection, right, to what Gina's saying in the chat. And wow, it's 3:58. Wow.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun. Do we want to, see if there's any more questions out there from our crowd?
We can have a quick peeks, but we're pretty much at time. And one thing I did want to say is for those that we covered a lot of the kind of the fundamentals of the need for innovation in the market, and the danger of status quo in the first part 1 of the webinar series. So we'll send that out and have that link available to anybody who's watching this now or the recording. And we'll also do a reach out for, if you have interest in crowdsourcing and helping your organization boost innovation, we'll send an email out to the people who've registered, and there'll be a link here as well if you're watching the recording for next steps and other resources where you can help move this forward. I really do think we're in a world where the internet has been used and it's disrupted so many things, and it's created a lot of problems. I feel like there's almost a moral imperative to help the world be better innovation, because we've created these problems and we also have the capacity of solving them. But the better we work together and the better we use technology like the internet and all this other stuff to collaborate better and innovate better and organize better, the more successful we're going to be as a species. And I think that's kind of important. So that's what motivates me to do this stuff. So we'll provide some resources to people to continue the conversation or to drill down more.
Yep, definitely. And so yes, thank you to everybody that joined today. And Christian, thank you so much for your insights. And to Christian's point, we'll definitely follow up with everybody with some additional resources and along with our contact information specifically, if you are interested in reaching out to learn more about bringing the inside out or bringing the outside in.
Sounds awesome.
So thank you everybody for joining today, and hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.